So 2025 was terrible. Well, at least we can look back on the animated shows this year and single out some favorites of what we saw. And by we, I mean me, because a lot of shows came out this year, so much so that I opted to make this a top 15. But I do have some honorable mentions to go over first. Dandadan Season 2 was just as great as the first one, but I think I'm just waiting for the Space Globalists arc at this point. That's the point where the story gets really good. Isekai Quartet had its third season, and it's always nice to see Subaru in a position when he's not fighting for his life. Fiona and Cake was a little bit disappointed in how it's not as good as the first season, but it has its own deluge of lore drops that make it worth the watch. Witch Watch, Yano-kun, and Aharon-san Season 2 were their own flavors of cute, and Kirby Guardian is still one I recommend to everyone. I think two of the biggest news was My Hero and SMG4 ending, and while I do want to catch up to the finale of MHA at some point, I already said I do not care about SMG4 anymore, and I'm not sorry. I was gonna watch Fragrant Flower, but I decided to spend my time on other shows since I'm basically caught up with the manga. And honestly, it probably wouldn't make the list, but it's still very cute. That's another thing. A lot of shows this year caught my eye, but I regrettably couldn't get to them. I kept hearing about how amazing Apocalypse Hotel and May I Ask for One Final Thing were, and I do apologize to my friends who have recommended me to death to check out Apothecary Diaries and Ranma. I do plan on getting to a lot of the shows that came out this year, so for now, these are just my favorites of the ones I've watched so far.
I get overwhelmed so easily. My anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe. What's come over me?
With indie animation booming right now, a lot of them follow similar ideas and trends. Shows about exciting worlds, or kick-ass action, or dramatic theory-worthy revelations. Pieces of Powder is not one of those shows. Where other indie animation pushes to be exciting turns for the industry with wildly creative ideas, Pieces of Powder opts to utilize deceptively cute but effectively simple animation for uncomfortably accurate portrayals of adolescent anxiety, depressive episodes, and the physical and mental turmoils of immense self-loathing. It feels both like a warm hug and a direct stab to the heart with the characters involved in this awkward situation. Though partially my reasoning for this placement is because of episode 4, which is my favorite so far, mostly because it finally puts emphasis on the other characters, including Gwen, who is instantly my favorite of the series right now. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but out of every indie series that deserves a fan base, this deserves a fan base just from how much it brings to the table in its themes and messages, and I hope this prompts others to check it out. Well, if Elio was our underwhelming flick of the year, at least we got one Pixar animation that's genuinely great, and Win or Lose is unsurprisingly fantastic for a Pete Docter production. The story largely follows a softball team getting ready for a big championship game, with each episode following the perspective of a different character, and it is a fascinating watch. From the different ways these characters interpret the same event to their unique struggles being portrayed in vastly distinct visuals, Lori's anxieties represented by a ball of sweat, Kai's pressure by her floatiness, the mom's reliance on social media by a cloud of likes, things like that, and culminates in a multitude of revelations that sum up to learn from your experiences and keep moving forward. Though honestly, not all of the stories coalesce very well into its kind of brain mash of a finale, and admittedly the very first episode is my favorite just because Lori's story is so concise and is the best at being a complete experience. Side note, it's really messed up that the original trans storyline for Kai was cut and then never mentioned again, but also really funny that watching the series, Kai is very trans. It's like Shiki levels of bordering on text and subtext.
Don't feel like picking up my phone, so leave a message at the tone. It's a day I swear I'm not doing anything, nothing at all.
Okay, first of all, why has the opening dance not taken off on social media yet, like with Wotakoi and Skip and Loafer? It's so catchy and adorable and fun, and I could watch it forever. That aside, See You Tomorrow at the Food Court has a pretty simple premise. Two girls meet at a food court after school and talk about whatever they feel like at the moment, from gacha games to kanji characters to fanfiction. And other than looking pretty and being voiced perfectly, these are some of the most human conversations you will ever hear in an anime. This is pretty much how me and my college friends talk, and I could definitely see myself loving 50 more episodes of just this. And Wada being a loud and proud weirdo reminds me so much of one of my best friends who is a big yaoi person, and she is 100 times better than most quirky manic girls because she wasn't written to be a man's partner, inadvertently making it a creepy thing where we try to make an otaku girl as desirable as possible. If you want a low-key anime to vibe to, it's only 6 episodes long, and this one is definitely worth a glance. I'm gonna be honest, the reason I made this a top 15 instead of a top 10 list was because I felt really bad excluding Kyoto Animation's latest work, City the Animation, simply because they are my favorite studio ever, and from the same talent behind Nichijou, I honestly don't love that show all that much because of how disconnected most of the bits seem to be from one another, and when it really wants to focus on a bit, it really focuses on that bit, whether you like it or not. And City has a bit of that problem here and there, but the biggest difference that makes it way better is that the surroundings and the characters actually change. I absolutely love these characters and the situations they get in. That final episode is some of the bestest stuff of the year. The OP is a wave of sentimental for a simpler time, but the biggest achievement of this show is that it is, without a shred of doubt, the best animated show of the year, let alone when you factor in movies. Every single frame and bit of animation pops out, every visual gag is smooth and crisp, and the environments are so vibrant and alive. If it weren't for the heart and comedy, the animation alone is enough for this to be a high recommendation. And speaking of KyoAni, later this year we're finally getting Sparks of Tomorrow, or as I referred to in the past 20th Century Electric catalog, and next year we're going to get Ruri Dragon, and I highly recommend people check them out when they eventually come out. I don't have much to say about the 3rd season of Smooling Fronds other than it might be my favorite season out of the bunch. I mean, sure, I don't particularly care for Silly Samuel as a character, though I do think his episode is generally good. But other than that, every single episode has been a hit. There wasn't one that felt like it was losing momentum. If I had to pick a favorite out of the batch we got, I'd say the Schmaloogle episode is my favorite, just for giving Charlie a lot to do in training these Smurf knockoffs, as well as him discovering this wizard's insecurities with his balding head. Though every episode has its moments. Mr. Frog visiting his father, played by Creed Bratton, was hilarious as well as shockingly depressing, and of course, Squim is just an epic character. This was a lot of fun, and I really hope whoever wins the Warner acquisition doesn't cancel the planned 4th and 5th seasons.
Isn't it nice to find yourself somewhere different? Whoa, why don't you let yourself just be wherever you are?
Studio Bind is a relatively new anime studio with their only work so far being Mushoku Tensei and Onimai, both of which have their own share of fans and detractors. There's certainly a tone and style in what they choose to adapt. And this year they both met and subverted those expectations through 2 separate series. I was really looking forward to Ruri Rocks, not just because it looked beautifully animated, which it is, but because I had an entire phase of my life where I was obsessed with gemstones and rocks, so the subject of mineralogy spoke to me immensely. I had a blast every episode just watching as Ruri grew more entranced by the natural order around her, and seeing her special interest in jewelry grow into a special interest into how these gems form and are discovered in the first place. The focus on research especially spoke to me as a college student, and I also found the character of Nagi Arado to be inspiring in the way she is so determined to contribute to her field of study. I really recommend this to anyone who is interested in mineralogy, and especially earth science majors in university. Just the one minor note I'll say about this is that certain character designs and animations can be a little distracting, which is pretty much the studio mind flair. The Sound Euphonium author finally wrote another story about high schoolers in a club that participate in national competitions, and already she seems to have established a style in her writing and characterization. You will see a lot of similarities between Sound Euphonium and Flower and Asura, from the reluctant heroine to the perfectionist bestie to the club president with family issues, and a handful of moments that are right on the edge of queerbaiting. Just that this time it revolves around a broadcasting club instead of a wind ensemble club, which itself has its own moments of inspiration, especially to me as someone who has had to learn a couple of these pointers for theater. And I do love the chemistry and found family-esque vibe. This will definitely be a favorite to the right audience, especially public speakers and broadcasters, but what keeps it from climbing as high as something like Sound Euphonium is just that the characters individually don't have a whole lot to them, and there isn't a central bond to ground us in the overall narrative like the one that Kumiko and Reina have. Yes, we learn a lot about these characters, and the relationship between Hana and Mizuki is there, but we don't get a whole lot out of it, especially in the middle. Still, both of these were fantastic entries in anime this year. So, back in 2021, one of the shows that caught my eye was Killing Slimes for 300 Years, just from how cozy the trailer looked, and yes, because the soundtrack slaps. But it took me by surprise by being the funniest thing I watched that year, with its anachronistic visual gags and dialogue on the same comedic level as Hercules. So that might have shifted my expectations a little bit for season 2, because while it is still the cozy, wholesome show I remember, these episodes were noticeably not as funny, which I found a little disappointing. Not that there weren't any standout jokes, though maybe fewer. The goddesses as an idol industry was, I thought, really funny, as well as currently relevant. The jellyfish spirit who draws haunted art is fun. Sandra is a fantastic addition to the cast who fits right in, being the cute little sister of the slime twins, and I actually like Flatorte more this time around and appreciate her involvement. And Azusa is still a very funny MC. My only genuine gripe with this season is that Laika isn't in it much despite being Azusa's very first roommate. Like, it seems like when they were giving screen time to Flatorte, they took it away from Laika. Still, that's a pretty small thing in what is otherwise a cozy show that I wish more people talked about.
Finally, we're back to who we're meant to be.
This was the year that I finally sat down and watched every Phineas and Ferb thing ever, and I loved almost all of it. It's such a masterpiece of a comedy series that has now become my favorite non-anime show. However, the revival season this year, as much as it pains me to say, is definitely my least favorite season so far. Even if you don't mention the studio changes that have somewhat affected the animation style, I just feel like these jokes and situations don't really put these characters in their top form. With the exception of Lord of the Firesides, which is one of my all-time favorites now, and to an extent Ballad of Bubba Doof, none of the episodes have really stuck out in my mind that much. Still, it's a testament that the core cast is just as lovable and funny as ever, with the fantastic framework that this show has going for it. I'll take Phineas and the gang in any form you give me, except for the terrible Kelly Osbourne special.
I'm an international super spy. Super spy! Super spy!
More Spy X Family, and it's just as good as the past few years have been. The comedy, the animation, and especially the character work is off the charts, finally giving spotlight to other characters like Yuri and Fiona. The bus jacking arc was excellent, the Wheeler arc was exceptionally harrowing as the first legitimate confrontation between Twilight and Yuri, and Lloyd's backstory in these past years that have just been awful hits gut-wrenchingly close and is such an important story to tell that I think elevates the show to essential anime viewing. While this is definitely better than the second half of Season 1, I hesitate to call it a masterpiece alongside Season 2 and Code White. I just loved the cruise ship arc so damn much that I don't think any Spy X Family thing is gonna top it anytime soon. And Yor was kinda out of it in this season, even though I do love her friendship with Melinda. I love the show with all my heart, and I'm looking forward to more.
Zubo's power is terrible, that act was so unbearable. I'm super duper hoping that those limbs are not repairable.
Nice to know that Digital Circus is still going strong, with 3 incredible episodes this year that are some of their best. Okay, except for Untitled, which still has great moments from President Pomni to the anime scene to the bar scene, but it did run out of gas a little towards the end with some oddly non-existent sound design. They All Get Guns was honestly my personal favorite, just because it feels the most like a complete episode, and Jackson Pomni's Fallout is such a visceral display of incredible dialogue. And Beach Episode was a mind-bending masterpiece of the biggest rug pull while still giving us enough info on the world itself. And I'm glad we're finally realizing sympathizing with the AI is the last thing this show wants us to do. Very excited and very scared for the final stretch. ReZero is still as incredible as ever. Not much I can say compared to last year when I already talked about Season 3, except that this batch of episodes was a blast to sit through, picking up where Part 1 left off, with each of the heroes divvying up to battle the archbishops separately, and all of the fights are spectacular. My favorite episode was the one on Teresa Vanestrea, where we got a great fight, a tragic backstory, and an emotionally devastating scene between her and Wilhelm in her final moments of consciousness. But my favorite fight has to go to the classic trio of Subaru, Amelia, and Reinhard taking on Regulus. It's honestly beautiful seeing Subaru and Amelia working alongside each other, and I loved how it relied on Reinhard and Amelia's powers while Subaru had the wits. It honestly reminded me of the very first arc, and it culminates in, honestly, the single best villain death ever, not just for how despicable and petty Regulus is, but in terms of the presentation, the irony that Amelia doesn't remember him, and the sheer psychological horror of his circumstances. And then Otto is just the best boy. Next year we're getting Season 4, which will adapt Arc 6, and I'm just gonna say it now, if you've not seen this series, you need to watch it immediately, just so you can experience in real time the best horror fantasy you will ever see. I'll take 4 more episodes of Pokemon Concierge, even though it obviously deserves like 100, and I still love it just as much as Season 1, with the cozy stop-motion animation and the endearing characters. But a particular standout episode is the one where the ex-boyfriend comes back, and at first I was worried it would dive into a reuniting ex trope, but it actually handled their dynamic and parting in such a mature way that I was just captivated by. I thought this was the cute Pokemon at a resort show. Don't go making me feel pensive over this. I also want to throw in Knights of Guinevere, just because I don't want to dedicate an entire section to it, because I don't think I'm going to include pilots in these top series videos anymore, and the recent tiffs on Glitch in their merchandise department have left me a little sour on this, but I do still love it, and I will point to my video on the pilot, which explains all of my in-depth thoughts on the story and the characters, but especially its themes on the perversion of beloved icons through corporate greed. That can be read as Disney, but just applies to everyone.
We can relate. Our side by side is vain. I knew all along we'd find some way to communicate.
Sometimes the nature of a show's existence is enough to propel it to a high spot. Milky Subway is a monumental series not just for its production values and masterful character writing, but because of how most of the series' production is handled by one guy. A sequel series to what I believe is a college short film, the show follows 6 delinquents finding themselves on a runaway train and figuring out how to get off it. The episodes are a mere 3 to 4 minutes long, and you can basically binge the whole thing in just under an hour, but this expertly uses its runtime to give each and every character their significant moments. From the bad boys receiving a thank you for the first time, to the shrimpy kid who wants to prove himself through his technological prowess. But the biggest reason why this won me over is that it does what I have been wanting animated media to do for years. Have the dialogue be really quick and really witty. Characters talk over each other, they stutter, they effectively communicate, and it is awesome, especially in a medium constantly overshadowed by the same 5 phrases over and over again. This is much appreciated. Milky Subway is just a blast of fun, and you should definitely check it out for free on YouTube when you get the chance. Every year there's at least one show that genuinely shocks me, not necessarily because of how good it is, but because of how good at being good it is. And Rock is a Lady's Modesty is undeniably my pick for the biggest underrated gem of the year that a lot of people missed out on. It blew me away on every single level from beginning to end. The initial setup seemed right up my alley, with the premise of two girls at a rich school forming a heavy instrumental rock band on a whim to escape the constraints of their everyday lives to simply be themselves. But it takes that familiar mashup of concepts and executes them in such a way that just pulls you in. Everything about the characters' desires, their own personal philosophies on what rock means to them, their individual backstories, and especially their banter is extremely funny, but also personal, as if you're on this journey alongside them. And all of that cathartic character chemistry is perfectly voiced. But like with any musical, manga to anime adaptation where the initial focus is on the writing, the real make or break for these types of shows is how good the actual music will be, and boy is it! Aside from Sound Euphonium, I have not been this hyped by an animated performance in forever, less so by every single performance. Whenever there's a jam session or an impromptu band recital or a legitimate battle of the bands, each and every song is a genuine headbanger, accompanied by some of the best animated hard rock you will ever see, largely due to the music and motion capture being done by the legendary Bandmate. I was jaw-dropped and amazed at every single frame and second of these performances. Even if there were some narrative hangups like some basic belief suspension or the token harsh critic character going too far, I could not help but fall madly in love with this show because of how excited the flowing spirit of rock made me. Not to mention, with the whole philosophy on rock emulating one's true identity and keeping their band a secret from their rich families and friends at the risk of being kicked out of their homes and society's acceptance as a whole, there is unironically a queer reading somewhere here, especially when these two have extremely passionate periodic musical dialogues during their rock sessions that could be a metaphor for something. It's not perfect, and it will definitely take a while for a potential season 2 since it's kinda caught up with the manga, but I was just flabbergasted at how much I enjoyed this, that despite some issues, it is definitely one of the best of the year and of the decade.
Why do I do this to myself, and why do I even try? You don't, so baby, why do I?
Last year, How to Become Ordinary was one of my favorites because of its breathtaking animation and its shockingly bold story. And season 2 this year just solidified this as one of my favorites of all time, and one that I will enthusiastically recommend to everyone I know. Just as visually innovative in its cinematic language, just as unique in atmosphere, and especially just as potent in its themes and character writing. Picking up where season 1 left off, with the most shocking fallout between friends I've seen in forever, we follow Kobato and Osanai in their separate relationships as they're caught in an overarching mystery concerning a series of arsons at their school. And aside from it just being a good mystery in general, we see in action how being ordinary affects these two. These two have always wanted so badly to assimilate into the world of ordinary people that they were willing to cut ties from one another to do that, but they find that they're just too different to really fit in. The point of this series is that finding the people who understand you the most and spending time with them is the most beautiful feeling ever, and this captures that perfectly. I especially love how we also got an arc where Kobato and Osanai solve one last mystery while revisiting when they first met. Sure, I wish the side characters had more to do, and that last mystery has a pretty bonkers answer, but the lead up to it is still masterful, and anytime these two are on screen is some of the best stuff all year. Kobato being a super sleuth, and Osanai being completely sadistic and also completely in the right. Remember, boys, always ask for consent before kissing a girl on the lips, or else she will use her 5 billion IQ to do something worse than ruin your life, completely obliterate your ego. But speaking of how to become ordinary, the same studio will be animating You and I Are Polar Opposites, and I implore literally everyone to watch it, and Ramparts of Ice as well during the spring. But anyway, those are my favorites of 2025. What were yours? Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as always. Thank you for watching, and catch you next time. And yes, I am working on my Soul and Ride Your Wave re-reviews, don't worry.